Good morning, my name is Sam Allen. For those of you who don't know me, I'm stepping in for Mr. Kevin Jackson, so please don't rate me on my abilities to compare to him as a moderator. I run a small business called Sequoia Partnership, and we help venues grow from good to great, and I'm delighted to be the moderator for today's panel discussion on CRM. We're a small group today, which is quite nice because it means that I'm going to pick on everybody if you don't ask some questions, because we've got a great panel here who I'm just going to introduce now. But this is a discussion, so they are here, they are the experts, allegedly. We shall find out in the next 45 minutes. But these are our experts, so they are here for you. If you have a question, please just raise your hand and I'll just bring you the microphone. It is just for the recording for the video. So is that okay with everybody? So, yes, big welcome to our panellists. I will introduce them one by one. First of all, at my far end, on my far right, this is Matt Franks. If you haven't met Matt, he's the Director of Events at DRP. Now, Matt's got over 20 years' experience, and I am going to read this as well as I can. 20 years' experience in creative and service-orientated positions. He specialises in live events, creative communications and brand experience, so I think his skill set around this topic is going to be second to none. He's directed many award-winning projects for a range of clients across different sectors. Experience in establishing, leading and growing business areas in order to maximise profitability and efficiency through clear strategic direction and leadership, developing talent, restructuring teams, improving business systems, driving change and sustainable growth, and creating the longest sentence for a moderator. Can we welcome Matt? Thank you, Matt, for coming. The thorn or the rose in the middle of our thorns will decide. Please welcome Tim. Tim is the managing director of a business called WheelSpinner, and we're going to ask you why you called the company that as well, I think, today. So Tim is a sales and procurement expert with over 10 years' experience leading teams in multinational organisations across a range of industry sectors, and he has worked for some interesting businesses. His clear vision, innovative thinking and resourcefulness have been instrumental in driving increased revenues, robust processes, so again, business systems, robust processes, and improved people retention for a host of blue-chip clients. And WheelSpinner, which has been going for 2 years now, I've just been running my business for 18 months. I've asked him when it stops hurting. He says almost that it's almost stopped hurting. WheelSpinner is the result of Tim's strong commitment to make integrity a cornerstone of effective negotiation. I think we'll all appreciate that. While also giving individuals the tools to make a real impact within their organisation and career. So let's welcome Tim to our panel. Last but never least is Richard John. Is there anyone here that doesn't know Richard? Do we need one? So we'll talk about
put that right
Richard.
later.
Richard is a management training and business consultant, and he specialises in our sector. He's a trainer, consultant, and journalist. You will have seen many of his fabulous pieces of work in conference news.
You are too kind.
You may have seen it in other industry titles, as maybe somebody else, who knows. What's really important to know about Richard is that he's the COO of Realise, and if you don't know about Realise, they are the UK's specialist event agency, and they are specialising in delivering the event assistant apprenticeship. If you don't know anything about this, you should know about it, and please talk to Richard at the end. He's also been appointed as a course director for the teaching faculty at the Chartered Institute of Marketing. He's a guest lecturer on events, written 5 books?
Yes.
Just 5?
Just
5 books. And he also wrote and developed The Inside Job, which is a television series for Channel 4. So an expert across our industry and outside our industry, and hopefully a relationship management expert. Please welcome Richard.
Thank you.
So if we're going straight into this, when Kirk asked me to moderate this, I found this quite an interesting topic. First of all, I thought, I'm not sure how we're all feeling. I want to get a general consensus. Who here in their business has an actual CRM tool that they use? So hands up who hasn't. So the majority of people, bigger hands. Okay, so we've got would you say 50-50? You watching? Can I have a hands up on who believes that they are using that system effectively? Okay. So we've gone from half the room to 4, including one of the panellists. Thank goodness. Only one of the panellists.
Yeah.
Did you put your hand up, Matt?
No.
Some of the stats that we've pulled from some quite scientific reports, 69% of CRM projects have little impact on sales performance. So we'll be asking the question, is that system or is that human? 70% of CRM initiatives will fail over the next 18 months. So how do we become that magic 30? I'm really interested, I want to ask you the question, Matt, when you were talking to Kirk about some of the topics that we could be discussing which could be of interest to the events community, this was quite important to you. Tell us a little bit about relationship management, how it works with you, with your business, and where you see the failings or where you see the opportunities.
Yeah, I think so. Customers and clients are at the centre of everything that we do. That's why we exist. We exist to provide an amazing service. But most importantly, it's about building those relationships, because for me personally, I think that's where we get our business growth. And I think people by people. So it's always showing empathy in terms of everything that you do and understanding your audience and delivering on those promises. Because for me, that builds trust, and then that continues to build that relationship. So yes, CRM is an important part of it, but for me, it's much, much more than that.
Tim, what is the most important thing to remember when you're managing a customer relationship with your years of expertise in this?
Okay, so I come from a slightly different perspective, because I spend most of my time now training procurement people how they're sold to. So over the last sort of 2 years, I've got a very different viewpoint on it to how I used to think about it in terms of customer relationship management. So I think certainly from where I sit, it's not about the deal, it's about the relationship. So an awful lot of companies are focused, and we have to say, I've been guilty of it in the past as a sales director, of get the opportunity and get the opportunity one and over the line, but it's not about that. I think when you change from thinking that it's about the deal, and it's not, it's about the relationship and the longer term relationship on building with the client, that's when you start to really, really come into your own as a salesperson. And I think if you can try and take that and then add into that candour as well, because a lot of our buyers that we deal with, a lot of procurement people I see on a day-to-day basis are very cynical about salespeople. And the more open, transparent and candid you can be with them, the more likely they are to then be able to let down that cynicism, let you in, and let you be able to develop that relationship with them.
How many salespeople in the room? I'm actually surprised that not everybody says that they're a salesperson, because I don't think you have to have a job title that is sales. Are we backwards in terms of relationship management in this industry, Richard?
I don't want to upset anyone, but absolutely. I think one of the interesting things is, because I regard myself as an analog person in a digital world, and I think what you find is that CRM systems are great, but it's the old problem of garbage in, garbage out. CRM systems are there to help us talk to customers the way they want to be spoken to. And I wonder, we probably all go to Confex, or exhibitions like Confex. Yeah. And one of the things that I always find is I will go to Confex, and I will take this lovely, charming, friendly face round, this one, and I will meet, hopefully, lots and lots of you guys with the intention that at some stage in the future, a relationship of some sort will develop when it's appropriate. Inevitably, what happens is we have the thing of, whether it's exchanging business cards or just swiping, that we don't have the necessary length of conversation that means you have the data to put into your CRM system to contact me at the right time. So we end up with a situation of you do contact me at the wrong time when I'm just not able to offer anything that's suitable. And there's nothing wrong with the CRM system. That's just down to training and human interaction. We were touching on this, the fact that there are still so many organisations that measure success as how many phone calls have you made today. And they will measure the wrong things rather than the right things. So there's no actual value. How many calls have you made, as opposed to value? And that's an organisational issue, because companies don't understand the idea of what customer relationships mean.
So in terms of that, I think that's a really good question to direct to Tim. Tim has worked for some interesting organisations. We won't pick on any of them. If you're linking in with Tim, I'm not going to pick on any in particular. But you've worked for some conference companies, publishing companies that have been, should we say, relationship management probably wasn't at the forefront of their sales direction.
That's such a lovely way of putting it.
I don't know if some of these companies where they are measuring success on making somewhere between 80 to 120 phone calls a day. That's what success is. People know the companies we're talking about. A, they are successful. That's number one question. Are they successful? And B, is that shifting now? Are we seeing a trend and a change?
Okay, so I started in a boiler room in Old Street without a computer, having to queue.
That's not because he's old, by the way.
It's not because I'm really old, although my son keeps telling me I am. But with 5 computers around the room, you had to queue for at lunchtime to print out paper leads and then bang phones, just trying to do 15 grand deals. And ultimately, this is 2002, and we were very, very successful at it. But I did 5 years there, but it was overpromise, underdeliver, constantly firefight, keep trying to bash down the same doors. If it wasn't working, use somebody else to do it. And ultimately, and part of the reason for starting WheelSpinner is that the world has changed, and procurement people have evolved. I spent an awful lot of time with the Chartered Institute of Procurement and a lot of CPOs who tell me that their world has changed. They aren't interested in people just hammering them with scripts and trying to just get them over the line. They're interested in insights. They're interested in being challenged. They're interested in being challenged because you've got the knowledge to be able to challenge them, and they're interested in you being very honest and having great integrity, because that is ultimately what's going to make them want to be an internal champion for you. So you only have to look at some of the organisations that we won't mention, but most of them have either now been sold, gone out of business very quickly, or are really struggling in the current marketplace. And the more niche providers that have got more senior salespeople, or they're training their salespeople to build relationships, are the ones that are being ultimately more successful in the industry.
So the world has changed. We're losing some of these boiler room organisations.
Thank goodness for it. Although the one thing I would say for it is that in terms of a training ground for work ethic and for understanding what true hard work is, it was an incredible environment. So that going from somewhere that was a boiler room focused, 2.5 hours on a day, to the Guardian newspaper, where they wouldn't even look at a phone because it would just be dirty to see it, and bits sitting on beanbags all day. It was a very, very different world, and ultimately it was very easy to then succeed in a different organisation where, having been driven so hard to work so hard, when you went into a different environment where people just weren't used to be driven at that pace, it was then very, very easy to then get to the top of that organisation.
Yeah, that's interesting. In terms of talking about big brands, Matt, you have huge experience working with some of the biggest and the best brands out there. Where should we as an industry sector be looking at, and who's doing this well out of our little goldfish bowl of events that we tend to be stuck in occasionally?
From a brand point of view?
Yeah.
So I think we see so many differences, and surprisingly, a recent brand, I'm not going to name them, one of the biggest problems we have is procurement, because they're procured on getting the best deal possible. And actually, she inflated our rates, but at the same time, it's all about rebate. It's rubbish, because it's not about the delivery, and I think we're building a much better relationship beyond procurement, but we're being controlled, if you like, annually in terms of the services we can provide, but the rest of the business are knocking on our door saying, but we want you to do this for us because of X, Y, Z. Procurement are ticking a box saying, well, you can't because our data says you can only deliver this. And I think that, for me, is one of the big issues within procurement, and the way that large organisations see themselves in procuring the right services, because it's a challenge when you're working for an organisation that has many services to offer, because we can offer much more competitive rates, but consistency across their delivery. I think there are other organisations. We work for a major retailer, and if you look at our website, you'll see who that is. But ultimately, they're amazing. We've gone on a phenomenal journey with them and procurement, and their view is they can't procure event services because people buy people. That we're not pens, we're not a commodity, and actually we're a partner. And for me, that's the key thing. It's that transition from becoming a supplier and providing commodity services to being a partner, someone that they can ring up and just ask advice to, someone that they can just call on, that they know are going to provide support. And actually, more importantly, it goes on a journey with them. And I think we started working with them doing small projects. We've now been working with them for 11 years and have done everything that they've embarked on, and they're new challenges for us too. So it significantly varies, and I think there are some, for me, I see the benefits when we're building relationships directly with the people we're servicing and not going through procurement services.
So we're talking now that we need to change that whole buyer, supplier, and stop calling ourselves this as we do in this industry where we're planners and the dirty people. You know, that seems to be, you know, we're an industry again, so we're going back to what can we learn from, and perhaps we can learn from some of these organisations. Richard, in terms of the technology, you run a series of smaller businesses. How, have we got some SMEs in the room? Yeah, we're nodding. There's quite a few SMEs in the room, aren't there? How, as an SME, do you use technology to manage your relationships with across? Because you run across Realise, you've got your books, you've got all these fingers in all these pies. So how do you manage that, and do you use technology?
I would say I probably use it very, very badly. I hold up my hand to that. So I'm also here to learn. For me, there are a couple of interesting things, though. Because we are looking to spread the word of apprenticeships, one of the things we realise is that, pardon the pun, is that just about every organisation could take on an event apprentice, but it's sensible for us to hit the kind of the trade associations. So we actually focus our efforts on the trade associations. And many of you will be familiar with this concept of the Pareto law, the 80-20 rule. One of the things we just have to do is, because we all have a very finite resource, which is time, we have to focus on where the value is. And I think a lot of the times, organisations aren't encouraging people to focus on value. It's like, we're measuring the wrong things again. So it's like, where do you focus? And CRM's systems should just help you find out where are the areas you should really focus. But, I mean, one thing that I just wanted to pick up is we work in an industry that generally is a very, very friendly industry. And I think some of you fed in comments about, how do I establish a good, friendly relationship? And the comment I would make, and this is probably because I'm naturally grumpy, is I don't necessarily want to be friends with people. I want to have a good relationship with them, but I choose friends, and work is different. And I've got lots of friends in the industry, which will surprise many of you, but they were in the industry, and we met through the industry and then became friends, not the other way around. And one of the things I would suggest, and I really agree with what Matt said, is we need to understand we offer expertise. And the analogy I'm going to give you is actually you ought to be thinking yourselves like doctors or like lawyers. I get on really well with my doctor, but bearing in mind where he sticks his hand, I don't want to be his friend. But I do trust him implicitly. And it's the same with my lawyer. I don't see my lawyer very often. When I do, I actually want a relationship where I go in and say, I'm going to do this, and he goes, no, you're not. You're going to do that. And it's that kind of, let me tell you what you need. The perfect example is, if I ever needed surgery, I'm going to go to Dr. House, because he is grumpy and miserable, but he's the best doctor you'll ever find, if you ever watched House. And so this idea of constantly wanting to be friendly, to me, is actually, we're an industry that's about communications and being friendly, but I think sometimes we misconstrue what that actually means.
We are probably the friendliest industry out there. We're certainly the kissiest and huggiest industry, which I think we'll, I think that's a nice thing to have. In terms of when you're training people outside of, this industry, and indeed this industry, how, I'm not going to pull you for all your tips, because if people want you, then they need to be, coming to WheelSpinner. But in terms of that managing, we're all in this room, people are great at the relationships. But there's people in this room I've known for 15, 20 years, and those things work. How do you recommend technology and software to enhance those business relationships when you're training your blue chip corporate clients?
Okay, so I'm a big fan of tech. I run Salesforce in my business, even though I'm only a one-man band. And I keep it absolutely up to date. It's on my mobile phone. I look at it before I go in to see clients to remind me of kind of where I am. And it's because as I establish my business, I want to make sure that I've got the building blocks in there right from the very, very start, so that when it scales up, all the information is right and the behaviours and attitudes are in there right from the beginning. Plus, I can't very much go out to clients and tell them they need to do it unless I'm doing it myself. But I'm yet to go into an organisation, and I've done 5 or 6 Salesforce rollouts. I've seen them done well, I've seen them done badly, I've seen other systems being used, but I'm yet to go into an organisation and find it where it's being used effectively. And an awful lot of the time, I think that comes down to it's been put out and sold to people supposed to use it as, you need to do this, and it's very, very whip rather than carrot, and making people understand that it can actually be really, really effective in helping you to run your business. Ultimately, if you want someone to change their behaviour, which ultimately you need to do with technology, behaviour change comes from two areas. It comes from your conscious mind, but it also comes from your unconscious mind. And unless you can change someone's unconscious mind, which you can only do by them finding the benefits and advantages to it themselves, then you're not going to get anywhere. So ultimately, an awful lot of work that I do when I go into an organisation and they want me to start talking about CRM, the very first place that I start is individuals. And I start with the engagement of the individuals. How do they actually feel in the organisation they work in? How do they want to feel in the organisation? And ultimately, once you can establish that, then you can start talking about, okay, well, if we've got this tool, how do you actually think this can help you? Rather than just, you've got to keep your opportunities up to date and we're going to whip you in case you haven't got your close dates right. It's kind of getting them to understand that ultimately you can then, by keeping it up to date, it's going to make you more efficient and more effective at what you do.
Very nice. I've got a quick question. That's when you know you're getting old.
Matt Story, Gallaglass. Could you give a tangible example of how you use Salesforce effectively? You talked about it being on your mobile phone and you check it before you go into a meeting.
Okay, so let me give you a perfect example. So I went to an event in November last year and I met the global head of comms for Hyatt Hotels. And we had a really interesting conversation. She must have been the 20th, 25th person that I'd spoken to that day. And I'm a one-man band, right? So it's, for me, being able to store all this information in my head is pretty hard. We had literally a 10-minute conversation. She was very interested in what we were going to talk about, but she said, look, it's second week in November. I'm going to go to Lake Cerne with my kids for 3 weeks over Christmas, but I want to see you second week of January. I was like, okay, great. On site, I literally just put in a couple of notes about the conversation we'd had. I also just said, she's off to Lake Cerne for 3 weeks with her kids over Christmas. Got to the second week of January. First thing we did when we walked into the room, I said, hey, how was Lake Cerne at Christmas? And she went, that was really great, thanks. We had 5 or 10 minutes to talk about family and kids and what she'd done and the area she'd been at. Instant rapport was built, and that's purely... Now, had I tried to remember that fact, I can't, with the amount of people that I'm meeting at a conference or an event, I cannot track that much information in my brain at once. I mean, maybe I'm just really thick. I don't know. Maybe you guys are a lot cleverer than I am, but I can't do that.
But actually, you don't need Salesforce for that kind of information, right?
Well, you don't
have to use. So you could use Outlook, and that would be equally effective, right?
Yeah, and ultimately, what we're talking about here is customer relationship management and technology, right? So you can use Outlook to some extent as a customer relationship management tool. You can use Excel to do it. You can use a pen and a piece of paper if you really need to. That is still a customer relationship management system. It is a process that you are dealing with to try and track information. Whether you write it in crayons on your bathroom mirror, it doesn't really matter. That is still a system for retaining the information.
So how is Salesforce better?
So I just think it's more intuitive. Ultimately, I think it's essentially Facebook for customer relationship management. I think it allows you to do some very, very clever stuff in terms of being able to not only understand. I mean, I'm not on commission for Salesforce here.
Yeah, but it's a WheelSpinner, not Salesforce.
It could be any CRM.
Yeah, but any CRM system just allows you to then pull data out. So I can actually look at. So for example, if I look and say, okay, well, over the last year, I've pitched 18 different companies through to proposal stage, but actually only 6 of them went through and closed. I can look at the loss review. I can then look at all the reasons that I lost and actually then improve the way in which I'm selling to my client base by then being able to pull that data out. And if I wasn't storing that information and keeping that data clear, crystal clear, then I wouldn't be able to pull that out and improve my business.
And that's great. That is best practice, everybody, on how to do it. I'm going to say back to our stats that, 69% of CRM projects have little impact. DRP, we know, very successful, award-winning, plethora of awards across the live events and communication sector. You've got, for want of a better phrase, fingers in lots of different pies. You've got lots of people within the organisation that are all talking to different people in your brands. How does DRP do it as successfully as we perceive them to do it?
So I think we're going on a journey. We haven't always got it right, and we started off with the typical Excel sheets, and that was our CRM system. And I think we've gone through a transitional period where we've got invested in another system, and that's not really worked for us. And now we're moving to another system that is separate from our accounting system, because I think we were trying to do one size fits all, and it really doesn't. Our biggest problem is, whilst you're on Salesforce and you're accurately putting in that information and you're using it as a tool, it's not consistent across the business. And I think we appreciate that, and the information you get out is only as good as what you put in. We all know that. So we're still going on a journey about how we can streamline it and be more efficient. Where we're finding that we're really good is we've got account teams, and we're starting to grow key account teams as a business. We never had account teams. We used to have project managers or event producers, and you would essentially be an account lead, if you like. The minute we changed and we said, okay, we've got some key account teams, we saw real growth with those particular clients. The danger that we face at the moment is information is within the key account teams and within individuals. So I work across 3 key accounts. A lot of the information and the way the clients behave sits in my head. It's not documented anywhere, and that's a risk, because if anything happens to me, how are we cascading that information elsewhere? So we're definitely doing an awful lot more there. But what we're trying to do is not restrict ourselves to a system where we constantly have to input everything and we're reliant on it, because I personally think you lose the interface at times then, because you're so reliant on the technology, and it becomes transactional and it becomes less about that personal interface.
It's interesting because we've got some real experts in their own field who are quite running in established companies. I'm looking at you, Paul Black. If you leave Hills Balfour tomorrow, so Paul works for Hills Balfour and looks after the New York account, is that knowledge protected by the company, or do you take that knowledge and those relationships with you, or is it a bit of both? And I'm asking you a question, so you have to have the microphone.
Hi, good morning. It's a bit of both. I think you can't necessarily transfer relationships, going back to all your points, but the whole point with the CRM system is absolutely to share that intelligence, particularly if you're in a sales capacity, which all of us are, where when you're sort of sourcing conferences or incentives or association congresses, you want that to be within the company, not within, the person. So I can see it on both sides, but I think it's important to sort of, while we embrace it, and absolutely with the new data laws coming in next May or April, I think it's become, even more important on that side. But I think it's really important to sort of, remember that relationships are still key. And when people think of New York City, for example, I want people to think of me, so they give me, the ability to, win their business. So I think it's a combination of both.
Thank you. Richard, is the phrase "people buy from people they like" true? Does it still exist, and does it exist in our industry?
In short, I'd say yes, and I'm just thinking you've got an excellent example here, but to me, it's quite interesting because relationships are so important. Do we have any Doctor Who fans here?
Oh.
Okay, it's just the 2 of us then. But that's fine. So, you all know Doctor Who. He's just regenerated into a she, and the point is, every person, every actor who plays Doctor Who is very, very different, but the same kind of theme runs through the whole thing. I'm going to try and develop that into a whole article about what we can learn from Doctor Who. Different characteristics, but the knowledge, whoever plays the Doctor always carries all the history with them. So the fact is, yes, people do buy from people, but as with most industries, we have a churn, and the churn is important. But so actually, people also buy brands. There are brands that we're very, very loyal to. So I don't think we should get particularly hung up on this idea that it's all about the people. People are very, very important, but there's some very, very fundamental things about customer relationship management, and to some extent, I think there are some myths. You've heard this experience, this phrase, the customer's always right? Could I just ask, how many of you believe the customer's always right? Fantastic.
That's in case you're a big fat zero.
Yeah,
just for the video.
But we still talk about that, and the customer's usually wrong and sometimes a bit of an idiot. The only thing the customer is entitled to is good customer service, but this idea that the customer's always right is I think, quite a wrong one. And going back to this point about relationships, probably also heard this expression that you should treat customers the way you want to be treated. Would we all be happy about that?
There's a few nods.
They're all getting a bit hesitant now because they know I always ask trick questions. And the truth is, no, you don't treat customers the way you want to be treated. You treat customers the way they want to be treated, which I think is where CRM systems come in, because there may be people who actually don't want that kind of, phone up and have a chat. I've had people contact me and say, can I have a chat? It's like, no, I have a chat with my mother and she's bonkers. I'd rather have a conversation with you guys that's on something specific, and maybe it's about brainstorming. So I think we do have these issues about, people by people to some extent can be a bit of a cliche. I will, in terms of relationships, I kind of buy people who come to me with ideas, with research, with things that I can use. And even this idea that people are at the heart, the customers at the heart of our organisation, I'd say no, it's not. Money is at the heart of the organisation. And giving great customer service generates more money. It's not altruism, it's a straightforward business proposition. There's a gentleman there who's looking very thoughtful at me. No.
No, you've never looked thoughtful at anybody there, Matt.
Can I just add to the point
please
there?
do.
I think it's a really, really interesting point, and I back you 100%. The amount of times that I've had salespeople in interviews before, in commercial director roles previously, who said, when I come, I'm going to bring all my clients with me. Okay, I think in the hundreds of salespeople that I've hired over the last 15 to 20 years, I can think of maybe one or two that have actually successfully managed to bring clients with them. And I think that's, and also I remember in the early days when, I thought, I'm the best salesperson here, I should be taken more seriously, etc. If I leave, the whole business will fall apart. It's just rubbish. Like, it's just not true whatsoever. It's kind of, if people leave organisations, right? Great people leave, bad people leave. Ultimately, if a customer's doing a £2 million job with an organisation, you can't turn around and say, well, if I go, they're going to go, because it's just not going to happen. The customer's going to go, well, that's a shame, they had an account manager, we'll get a new account manager. And that's ultimately, so I think we need to understand our worth and understand where we sit in it. We need to understand certainly where management and where a business sees our value as well. Yes, we might be valuable and have that relationship, but ultimately irreplaceable. And the other point on that, and then I'll be quiet, is that I've been to a number of organisations where you've got the top salesperson who can actually act almost as a cancer within an organisation because they're holding so many different relationships and so many accounts. And the amount of times that I've gone in and said, okay, well, sadly, if you're not prepared to get on the boat, it's time to go. They go. Management panic and go, we've lost our best salesperson. You give those accounts to 2 or 3 people that are younger, hungrier, aren't just looking for the low-hanging fruit, aren't just doing deals they've done for years in a row, and suddenly you get a £2 million portfolio that turns into £5 million very, very fast. So I think it's just about making sure that you respect that and understand that relationships are extremely important, but ultimately the organisation is still at the heart, and the organisation will go on whether you are there or not.
So we're all expendable. Apart from my organisation, because if I'm not there, then it stops. It's end. No, I shouldn't say that. I've got bads in Holland. So we've had some questions, and please do shove your hand up. I can totter over in my heels. A question that's come through is that, how do I convince my MD that spending less time on the phone and on compliance with our software and more time meeting customers will improve the customer relationship? Matt? A good question, eh?
Yeah, almost go and set some targets and then go and prove him wrong. I think it's important, but I honestly feel face-to-face and being out there and that personal interaction is the way to growth. So the chat, because we have quite a lot of clients who just want the chat, just take them for a coffee. It doesn't have to be anything else, like coffee and a cake, and conversations spark into other conversations. And I've had it recently where we just came up with some ideas and said, hey, why don't we go and look at some festivals? We've gone to see 3 or 4 festivals, and now that's turning into a much bigger piece of work. That all sparked out of just going for a coffee and having a conversation around some festivals. So for me, it's really important. That wouldn't have happened over the telephone, I think, because when you're picking up the phone, you don't know what position they're in. You don't know what's happening in their organisation at that moment in time. They're distracted. Often they're reading emails or there's something else going on. If you go for like face-to-face conversations, you're in the moment having that conversation with them, so it's undivided attention.
Oh, how many people, when they look at their phone and don't recognise the number, notice that in the good old days we'd pick up the phone, wouldn't we? But now we look at the phone. How many people go, I don't recognise that number, I'm not going to answer it. It'll be a sales call. Yeah, and how many of us are salespeople? I mean, this is just absolutely... How do we change that status quo, Tim? That's just got to be the best oxymoron.
I totally and utterly agree with you, and I'm the world's biggest hater of email, purely because we're normal human beings and we have normal conversations, but as soon as we start an email, we all become Downton Abbey script writers. I've never ever turned to my wife and said, darling, we're out of milk, hence I must go to Tesco. I've got to go, we're going to be late picking up my son, thus it is imperative that we, this is just language that we all do it, right? And we all write emails that way and think, what is going on? And ultimately, you can't put tonality into email in any way. In terms of picking up the phone, I think there's still value in trying to get people on the phone, but ultimately, the amount of time that I now spend with my clients doing innovation in business development is huge. It's ultimately... I wanted a guy to sign a contract once and he wouldn't do it, so I phoned his PA up, found out what his favourite pizza was, went down, slipped the contract into the front of the pizza box and then sent it up to his office. I said, enjoy the pizza, please sign the bloody contract. And he came downstairs and he gave it to me, he said, thanks very much. And ultimately, what are you doing to change the status quo? Because ultimately, everyone's emailing, everybody's trying to phone, everybody's trying to reach you on LinkedIn. So what are you doing that's different? And more to the point, are you having fun? Ultimately, I love sitting down with people and thinking, okay, how else can we do this? I had a client recently who wanted to do some work with Intel and Samsung. So we just agreed with this company, we're going to send a Samsung phone with an Intel chip in it into space with 4 GoPro cameras on it. I mean, this is for a very large piece of work. It's costing us $3.5 grand to send this into space, right? So it's going to send it into space, it's going to see if it still works, it's going to drop down, and then we're going to give the video and the phone to Samsung and Intel and saying you should be working with this organisation because, right? How can you not want to engage with an organisation that's prepared to go to that level? And the amount of fun that sales team had, suddenly you've gone, pick up the phone, hide all this. It's not interesting. They're really excited, they're G'd up about it, and ultimately, if you're therefore planning, that's going to improve the win ratio. So 100% behind you. It's all face-to-face. You can't just be doing the same old stuff every day.
And whilst everybody's nodding and smiling, that's great, but we still have organisations within the industry that, from a leadership perspective, so Richard, I'll ask you in terms of what sort of language should we be speaking to try and create a bit of a paradigm shift in how we manage these relationships, in doing something different, which we're all in agreement by doing something different is going to be more productive for us in terms of being better salespeople, better professionals. What's the conversation we need to be having?
I think, so going back to the question that was asked, so someone said, effectively they were saying, I've got this issue about making phone calls and compliance. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to now imagine I'm the MD and someone sends that to me. So my reaction is, well, firstly, there's a thing, I'd separate the two out. Compliance, which is a legal responsibility, don't bring that to me. But if someone says, I don't want to be on the phone so much, that's just like, because I'm not getting very far, my response would be, well, we're sort of in the marketing business. Marketing is about testing. So I would like to say, if someone came to me and said, look, I'm hitting the phone, I'm not getting the responses I want. And in the past, I've worked with companies, I've been in the boiler room, and you get to have a manager who says, well, you must make more phone calls. And I think, as Einstein said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So I'd throw that quote at them and say, look, I'm making all these phone calls, I'm not necessarily getting there. So what I'd like to do is test. I'll carry on making some phone calls, but I'd like to think about doing something, and hopefully many of you will have a photograph of this and say, why don't we do an event like this? Because, hey, guess what? We're 50 people being exposed to a very beautiful building. How long would it, if I wanted to phone you all, especially now, you'll know my number and just ignore me, how long would it take me to get through to you guys? So it's like other people are doing it. So the kind of answer to the question is, if you want to change, if you want a paradigm shift, you have to forget about this thing about I'm making phone calls, it's not working. You have to give people, I've got some ideas. I want to try these things. Marketing is about testing. As we say in the world of training, there is no failure, there is only feedback. So it is about trying things and seeing what works. And it's a bit like LinkedIn. I've had some very, very good approaches from people on LinkedIn. Now I notice lots of people are getting in on it, and now it's getting a bit tired. You have to constantly try and stay ahead of the curve. I agree, email can be a bit tedious, but actually there's some very good e-zines that I get, and actually I send out an e-zine, or I just take the best bits of what other people have done. I think it's called repurposing. I repurpose. Copy from one source is plagiarism, but copy from two is research. So I repurpose and I research and I shove this stuff out. And people have this really insane idea that I'm quite clever. It's like, nope. I just steal stuff.
In terms of, actually interesting that we talk about LinkedIn because this was the new CRM system for us many moons ago. How many people use LinkedIn for managing relationships and building relationships? Yeah, so we're an industry that still use it. Are there specific ways that you would recommend that we use social media? So we've talked about systems, and I think we're all thinking, things like Salesforce or Delphi or whichever systems we've got. But actually, social media is it overtaking, and how should we be using this? We still have organisations that don't allow certain social media within the organisation. So how can we use that effectively to build relationships? And we won't talk about Tinder or anything on this, either, just for the record.
Okay, so LinkedIn is still my primary source for business development of very, very senior individuals. The reality and the reason that LinkedIn is so clever is because it appeals to the ego in everybody, because it allows you to basically go, I really hope by putting all this on, someone's going to come and offer me a big stonking job, or they're going to LinkedIn me and say, hey, that looks really cool, can I do some work? Any sales team that I go into, if their people haven't got LinkedIn Premium and their sales team haven't got LinkedIn Premium at £45 a month, it's a total no-brainer, just in terms of the amount of information that you can get on somebody, to even just be able to get an angle or a hook in terms of people they've worked with, organisations they've worked with. I also use it for posting all of my articles, and off the back of articles that I put or videos I put up, that leads to inquiries into the business. So I think using that is absolutely critical. What's astonishing, I find, is that when I sit and with buyers, and I deal with very, very senior sets of chief procurement officers, and I say to them, okay, so the very basic research I do on you before I try and talk to you is I go onto your LinkedIn profile, I look at how long you've been there, I look at any connections you've got, I look at the groups that you're part of, I look at any interests you've got. Once I've done that, then I go across to see if you've got a Twitter, I'll follow you on Twitter, look at anything that you've been talking about on Twitter. Then I'm going to go onto Facebook, I'm going to see if you've got an open profile so I can see if I can work out anything at all about
and that's
you,
before
your
you get
family,
arrested.
Then I'm going to go onto your website, then I'm going to see if there's anything that you've been mentioned on in terms of press releases, then I'm going to Google your name, then I'm going to try and see if there's anything in industry press. And that's before I even pick up the phone to meet you for the first time. And they sit there and they go, what? I'm like, okay, so when was the last time on a multi-million-pound contract you actually bothered to look at the profile of the salesperson coming to meet you? Not a single hand goes up in the room. Not a single one. So you've got to think in terms of the amount of research that we are doing compared to the people that we are trying to sell to on a day-to-day basis is massive. So it gives us a massive upper hand. It really, really does.
Interesting you bring research. Are we needing to change, Matt, in terms of from being the relationship managers, the sales people, how important now is sort of content and data? How important is research before we start managing and looking at these relationships that we wanted to develop successfully in the businesses?
I think it's really important. You need that knowledge, because I suppose when you go in and you can be interested in them as an organisation, and equally if you're looking at Facebook and everything else, them as an individual, that helps build those relationships, because it starts to build trust straight away. They understand that you know something about their industry, or you know something about their challenges or their environment. So I think it's really important.
I'm not suggesting,
I can carry on talking.
I'm not suggesting, by the way, that you go into a meeting first time and go, "Hey Dave, here like windsurfing."
but what it does,
that's going to be really, really creepy, right? But ultimately, and that's what people say. Well, if you did that, I'd be really scared. It's like, I'm not going to do that, am I? I'm going to walk in and say, I've been on holiday recently. Oh yeah, try windsurfing first. I windsurf. Do you?
What a coincidence!
But how far do you go in terms of that? Because as you said, Facebook is Facebook. Do we believe Facebook is a personal or private or personal? Open for both?
Both.
Can I ask how many of you got open profiles on Facebook that people can see stuff? Okay, so it's not personal. If you've got an open profile, it's not personal.
So I think that's quite important with what you're saying, is that we need to know that we've got digital breadcrumbs everywhere. And I just cleaned my toaster out yesterday, and they do literally get everywhere. I don't think that's any different digitally. Difficult customers, we haven't talked about. We're all in this world where we're all building these great relationships, and none of us have a difficult customer. Richard, being probably the prime difficult customer for people,
yeah.
So we'll use your expertise. With systems, do people, are people going to be honest? I dealt with this person and they're a real... If that information isn't there and suddenly you're talking to a customer that you haven't realised that your company have not had a great relationship with, how do we start managing that in terms of A, the systems, and B, our relationships?
Well, my slick answer is there are no such things as difficult customers. There are only customers with difficulties.
Did everyone get that?
Yeah.
And there's not enough sick buckets in the room now.
However,
but we love that line.
Well, what I would say is there are probably people who think I'm a difficult customer because they'll phone me up, and what they'll do is they'll start. For example, I had someone phone me up and they were telling me about their wonderful venue, and I wasn't engaging, and I said, you know nothing about me. You've just literally gone on this massive splurge, and you've just spent 15 minutes of my life that I can't get back telling me about a venue, and I'm not interested, thank you very much. Anyway, I met this, it was a young lady, I met her MD at an exhibition, and she hid, and he came up and he said, you were very rude. And I said, no, I wasn't. I was just being totally honest. And this comes into, if you look at, there are very kind of, very simple sort of psychological profiles that you can do to understand different personality types. And it was just that my particular personality type is if a stranger phones me up and says, hi, is that Richard? Yeah, how are you? Well, who the hell are you? It's none of your business. But that doesn't actually mean that I'm a terrible or difficult person. Because if someone phoned me up and said, Richard, we haven't spoken before, I was giving you a call because I work for a hotel chain and we've just done some research, thought you might be interested. It's like, yeah, okay, tell me more. So that's my point. It's about the bit that CRMs often don't tell us, or we don't use them properly, is to understand personal profiling. And it's a bit like, if you take, Alan Sugar, Lord Sugar, who comes across a grumpy old bastard, you just treat him as a grumpy old bastard. You don't do kind of social foreplay because he doesn't want it. But that's about understanding people. And a lot of the time when we talk about difficult customers, it's because we just don't understand them. It goes back to my point, you don't treat customers the way you want to be treated, because you treat them the way they want to be treated.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing for everybody to think about. And there's a lot of research around political intelligence, and if you haven't done any of the profile training, I think that's all very interesting. A question that we did have, and then I am going to ask if anybody has a question, just so that we keep to time, on difficult customers or negotiation. Do I win negotiation if only I get my way, or do I need to concede something to keep the relationship on an even playing field? We haven't talked about negotiation as an industry. I think it's something that we still don't talk about. In your experience, Tim, do you win a negotiation if you get it your way? Is that a win?
I don't think it's necessarily in terms of getting your way, right? Ultimately, a negotiation and where you end up with a win-win is something where you've ultimately ended up with something that you need and the client ends up with a solution, ultimately. I think in terms of where negotiation gets stuck and why it's kind of difficult is because we are so polite as an industry and as a nation as well. I mean, whenever we turn to people, we say, do you think possibly maybe that perhaps sometime in the future that maybe perhaps possibly you think about being interested in something I'm going to do? Yes, maybe possibly I might be. But, and we don't ask direct questions. And I think that when you're going into a negotiation, that the reason that we get stuck and we struggle is that we think that negotiation and closing is this massive holy grail, where ultimately if you've had transparency and candor with your client all the way through, and you ask them direct questions, and you say to them, look, ask me the direct questions, and I will give you the right answers. Whenever I deal with a client the first time round, I say to them, I'm like, look, if this gets to a point where you don't want to do it, please just tell me, okay? Because that's going to save me trying to contact you, wondering if it's going to go anywhere, and you sitting there going, I'm not sure if I want to answer the phone. A very, very quick anecdote. When I worked in a boiler room years and years ago, I phoned a guy to close a deal on a Friday, and he was in Australia, and he said, hello. I said, oh, can I speak to Steve? He went, oh, Steve's not here. This is Brian. I was like, no, this is you, Steve. I can tell your voice. He went, no, it's Brian. It's his brother. I went, okay, Brian, where's Steve? He went, he's in Adelaide. I was like, that's good to know. So why have you got his phone? Oh, he left it here. I was like, okay, all right, okay, well, can you let him know I called? Anyway, 5 minutes later, I got a girl who's working for me to call him, and she went, hi, can I speak to Steve? He went, yeah, speaking. I went, still me, Steve. He went, ah! I put down the phone. Right. And
And it is amazing that grown adults, the level to which they will go to avoid telling you no is astonishing. And that's what I think openness and that transparency is really, really important.
Openness and transparency, negotiating with the clients. What is your tip for us all, Matt, in terms of how you negotiate to win?
I think challenge is always good. So people are afraid of challenge. So you get those that will just listen to a client and go, yes, we'll go off and do that. But it doesn't mean to say you're doing the right thing or you're going to deliver them their best service or it's right for them. So challenge first and foremost, but also mould to the client. So you know at the point that it's tipping and you know that they're not budging and actually that's what they want. So go and deliver it and go with that and build from there. Because I think if you try and fight it too much and push, I guess I'd always question, what am I going to get by confronting them or saying no to something or challenging them that much?
Are we that awful that we can't say no?
I think you can say no, but it's how you say it and give other solutions. Some people just go, no, I'm not doing it.
I was always brought up as a hardcore salesperson as well, that a no wasn't for never. No wasn't never. No was just no for now. So some of these cheesy lines possibly still work. They are experts. Is there a burning question from anybody in the audience that they'd like to ask, not answer, like them to answer, before I go back to some of the questions that have already been posted? Oh, look.
I just wanted to make
Yeah, you do. That's fine.
It's not a question.
I just wanted to make the point about the person who asked the question about convincing their MD that they don't have to pick the phone up the whole time. I'd put it back to the MD and ask him how he buys things. How many things does he buy when people phone him up to sell him stuff? Because invariably the answer will probably be not very much.
That's a really good point. Yeah. Actually, in terms of research, that's a really interesting point. Thanks, Matt. How often do you as an organisation, and I'm going to ask, I might even ask all three of you if we've got time, but certainly let's start with you, Matt. How often do we look and research what our customers' buying patterns are? Do you consider that when you're looking at new business and development and relationship building? How people buy, when people buy? Is that important?
Yes. I think for us, we probably don't do it as much as others do. We will typically look, if we're going after a new client, we'll look at whether they're contracted, because you get 3-year deals, 5-year deals. When they're up for that, we look at when their events are, the pattern of events through trade, press, magazines, and you try and get as much intelligence and insight as you can to that point. It's quite hard to do for us because I think it's such a fluid service that we provide. It's quite difficult to get that information, particularly if you don't have the relationship, because people are quite closed about the stuff that they do, especially if it's internal, because you'll find a lot of what we do isn't shouted about in some of the publications and things. So I think that's a struggle for us.
That's interesting. It's really interesting. I'm not going to ask the question because I know that we're slowly going to be moving. What I will ask you all, because we always have takeouts, and I've written, I don't know about anyone else, but I've written quite a few notes and takeouts. To sum up around technology, CRM, what one thing are you going to tell everybody who they need to write this down? This is a burning, success-driven anecdote or key phrase about managing relationships well. Richard.
Wilfredo Pareto, who lived over 200 years ago, came up with the 80-20 rule, and that's it. We talk about, all people are equal. No, not in business. Customers are not equal. Some of them are much more valuable than others, and that's where you have to concentrate your effort. And this point about some customers being difficult, do you know what? All of you, especially if you use CRM systems, all of you have customers who you should ditch. You should fire some of seriously, you should actually think very carefully. You should be firing at least 20% of your customers every year because they cost you money and they waste you time. And you can only spend your time with one person, and you should spend it with the right person.
So the takeout is ditch your customers.
Yeah. Not all of them on day one.
I just wanted to clarify that. But, thank you for that. Tim?
For me, it's slightly twofold. The first is, in terms of when you get up every day, okay, are you trying to do the very, very best that you can? Okay, are you trying to be the very, very best person, or are you going, well, you know what, I'm just kind of going with the flow? Because ultimately, if you want success and you want to be good, then you need to constantly self-develop.
And the amount of salespeople I see, they're, oh yeah, I'm really interested in self-development. Great, tell me the last book you read. Tell me the last article you read. Tell me the last event like this that you went to. Oh, I don't go to anything like that. Right, well, then how do you expect to succeed? That is, ultimately, and therefore keeping your data up to date in Salesforce is easy for me because I'm a one-person band, but I still have to have discipline to make sure it's kept up to date so that I can run my business really efficiently. And that's because I'm really proud of it and I'm engaged in what I do. So it's just asking yourself that. But the second one is ultimately just having absolute integrity and honesty with the client, because ultimately, if you do not, it's going to come back and bite you in the arse. The amount of times that I had to put out fires where salespeople have sold people polar bears in dancing tutus at events and then didn't turn up, it always comes back to bite. And ultimately, by being really open and honest with the customer, they are going to respect you a hell of a lot more and for a lot longer than if you try and pull wool over their eyes or you try and be clever with sales techniques.
So that one tip was 5 tips in one. Just wrapping it up for the video there. Self-development, discipline, self-development, discipline, integrity. And if you don't want to speak to someone, call yourself Brian, the brother.
Or at least change the accent.
Change the accent. And to wrap that up, Matt?
I agree with all of those points. I think use CRM, but know what it's there to do and just make sure you're absolutely focusing on that relationship. It's that personal service, mould to the client and mould to the behaviours of them.
I think that's a really nice way of wrapping up what I hope everybody found a really interesting session. I'm hoping that at least one thing is going to resonate with everybody. I think there's some nods here that there's one thing that we can go back and do slightly differently. We can change maybe some conversations. We can change our behaviours in terms of our customers. And then hopefully when we come to our next event huddle, we can actually come back and talk about that measurement of success. So it just leaves me to say and ask the audience to thank our panellists so much for a really interesting event huddle this morning. Thank you.